Welcome everyone to the Bodybuilding Dietitians podcast. You're joined for another episode by myself, Jack, Damien, and Tiara as well. So last week we did more of an introductory style episode. It was great to show our faces quite literally. And but today we have a different agenda. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A. So we're looking forward to diving into some questions and having a chat about a range of topics. So I thought we'd basically get straight into it in TBD fashion. And this first question says, quite a simple way of expressing a very complicated question, but the right way to load carbohydrates pre-show. So a lot of different facets to jump into there. So we'll have a good discussion around it. But Tiara, what are your kind of initial thoughts on that question?
Well, a good question nonetheless, because you don't want to do the wrong way to load carbohydrates pre-show. But it's also a question of, do you even need to load carbohydrates pre-show? Or, how close within proximity to the show? And I believe that quite recently, in the past number of weeks, we've actually posted a really awesome infographic over on the TBD Instagram page, actually explaining different carb loading strategies for, really peaking yourself when it comes to showtime. So I believe there's like a front load, a back load, a mid load, a linear load, a deficit load. We didn't exactly include a fat load in there, but either, there's a lot of different ways that, you can manipulate carbohydrates if needs be, if that's actually going to bring a slightly more enhanced look to the stage for you. But God, that old saying, it highly depends on you.
Yeah, there's definitely a large degree of components. And I think firstly, establishing how responsive you are to carbohydrates, like what type of look you're trying to bring. And just like there's a lot of different responses to training volume or exercise selection, like the same goes with nutrition as well. So I think let's take a bodybuilder, for example. Someone might respond incredibly favorably to carbohydrates. Like Damien here is actually a great example of that, where he, when we introduce some higher carbohydrates, like I think his baseline lower day at the moment is like around 250 to 275 carb. And when we bring that up to 400 carb, which even then is a relatively conservative high day, he looks harder, he looks tighter, he looks leaner. A lot of the fatigue washes away, and we're basically able to repeat that for multiple days in a row with just looking better. Whereas other individuals, they might look a bit watery. They might not take the carbohydrates on board quite as well. And even then, there's multiple elements to that around their stress response. Like if someone is in a more stressed or fatigued state, chances are they're not going to be uptaking or utilizing those carbohydrates as effectively in terms of the physique presentation. Like the biochemical and sort of digestive responses will obviously still be undergoing, but it won't be as favorable from a composition perspective. So, but I think as Tiara was alluding to, there's quite a few different loading strategies. And again, firstly, establishing what is your response to carbs, which hopefully you've done some peaking tests or some high days or diet breaks in your comp prep to date. And then establishing, okay, am I trying to prioritize conditioning? Like maybe it's the first show of the season, like you're still looking to get more condition throughout the season, and you really just want to look a little bit more full for show day, then potentially something like a backload, which comes with an element of risk because there's not as much time for adjustment with a backload. You may kind of continue a fairly decent deficit up until the back end of the peak week, like the day, like 2 to 3 days before, and then run higher carbohydrates. And sometimes also a good way of addressing this question is like what genuinely is the wrong way to load carbs pre-show, because I think that also is like a process of elimination. So Tiara, what are a few things that you would say are the wrong thing to do, or things that you maybe see people do that is not maybe the best way of going about it?
I think going in blind and just hoping for the best and being under the impression that, okay, bodybuilding, basically got to diet super duper hard for a number of weeks and months leading up to that very first show. And of course, everyone just does a carb up, right? And that's just bound to enhance someone's look. So I think if you just go into it blind and you have no data under your belt in the sense of what, you were talking there, like it's important that you establish how do you respond to carbohydrates and how many carbohydrates and from what food sources as well. So I think that's really important to, plan ahead, make sure that you are, putting in some refeeds, some diet breaks. Hell, if you have the luxury of trying to do a mock peak week in your prep, that's definitely going to establish, okay, what truly does help to enhance your look. Because if not, let's say that you do consume like 2 days back to back of in the territory of 300 to 500 grams of carbohydrates, depending on who you are, your gender, your level of muscularity, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, oh, yikes, you just checked in with your progress photos and you definitely looked better before you started eating more food.
Mm.
You can obviously catch yourself before you're going to present that on a bodybuilding stage, right? So I think that's really important to plan well ahead. But yeah, another thing is I think a lot of people just make that mistake of, they again they approach show and they get really excited, understandably. You've been chronically dieted for a number of months, and then if your coach is like, hey, we're going to do like a pretty, aggressive carb up leading toward the show. And let's say you're dieting in the territory of like, again, like depending on who you are, like it could be a 45 kilo female or like an 80 kilo male, but carbs could be anywhere in the territory of like, what, 100 grams to 250 grams or something on lower carbohydrate days. But if you really dramatically ramp that up, and a client's like, wow, I'm used to eating 100 grams of carbs per day. Now I get triple and I get 300. They go really, really just crazy with like, oh my God, I've been used to eating just pumpkin and like, green vegetables. Now I get to eat like honey and I get to eat rice. And oh my God, maybe I could incorporate some cereal. They get like really food focused, really, really excited. If you introduce all of these things all of a sudden that are super unfamiliar for your guts, even if it does help to enhance your glycogen stores, if you are like bloated and distended or like constipated on stage, man, that ain't going to be a good look. Like, even if you're like filled to the brim in your arms and your legs, like we all know for bodybuilding, like you want to have that tiny little waistline, right? Because otherwise, like you just can't look past it. It just helps with obviously the symmetry. It helps with that X frame. It's just, and it feels comfortable too. Like when you wake up on show day morning and your waist is like, it's like, yes, let's go. So you obviously want to feel really comfortable in your physique as well. So yeah, keep things familiar, plan well ahead, know what you're doing. And I'd say always go on the safer side. Like you would so much rather show up on stage being a little bit less full than like filled to the brim, spilled over, feeling uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate reality for certain individuals is that they also could genuinely look better with lower carbohydrates. And again, there's certain ways that individuals may have a particular stress response to additional carbs, or potentially the way in which they store intracellular versus extracellular fluid. Because essentially, I mean, the reason why we load carbohydrates to begin with is probably for two main reasons. Like one, we just have more intramuscular glycogen, which is stored within the muscle, and that's intracellular. And we obviously want as much fluid and as many carbohydrates as possible in the muscle, so in the intracellular space, as opposed to the extracellular space, which is outside the muscle. If we have too much water there, that's what makes us look watery. And that's when you see people spill over and look more watery, it's because there's more fluid in the extracellular space, essentially. And not just loading too many carbohydrates can cause that, but it's also your stress, your hydration, like if you're not drinking enough water, or if your electrolyte balance is out of whack around sodium, maybe you're suddenly skyrocketing your sodium, like going from 1,000 milligrams a day to 8,000, you're probably going to skew things a little bit there, but also potentially other electrolytes as well, which we won't go down that rabbit hole or open that can of worms, but maybe we can in the future. And I think we may end on sort of Damien's peak week, because it's actually Damien's first peak week ever. And yes, it's nice to sort of end things with a bit of a case study. So throughout Damien's prep, like we've been doing some high days quite regularly, and particularly towards the tail end of prep, we've had the opportunity to kind of even do an extended diet break. We ran basically Damien's high days range anywhere from like 350 to 400 grams of carbs, which is in the moderate range, definitely nothing crazy high. And like for context, Damien's body weight is like around like 68 to 69 kilos. And so we're not talking like in the context of someone who is that body weight, it's quite a favorable amount of carbohydrates. And again, the data that I've subjectively collected from Damien, and another point to raise here is also just the quality of progress photos, the frequency of progress photos is incredibly important. So like for Damien, like it's the same natural lighting in the fasted shots. It's the same gym lighting in the pump shots post workout. So that's really helpful for me as a coach to kind of assess the look with carbohydrates. So we've gone with something very predictable, like a bit of a front load slash linear load, where we'll begin with high carbohydrates at the start of the week, and then that'll taper off very slightly to down from 400 to 350, which could get changed. And that's the other thing as well, is Damien will be checking in with me daily. He'll be sending me photos very regularly. I'm also relying on him for subjective feedback as well, because that's important around how he feels, like how tight his midsection is, how his digestion is, and all of those things will influence the carbohydrates. But that's, I mean, it's Tuesday now, so it's only day 2, but all of those things will influence. Like, I guess, Damien, yourself, like running through your first peak week, like any subjective thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, I guess around, I think the biggest thing for me in terms of the peak week, like it's a really exciting time, especially when people can get quite carried away with, I guess, with what you guys were saying around that, you have this allotment of carbohydrates that you may not have now. And that's definitely, even for me as a first time competitor, like, sure, I have a great understanding about what's expected with peak week and, obviously working within the space. But yeah, once you have been dieting for so long and it's now you do have this allotment of carbohydrates, it's like, okay, we still need to be strategic about how we do load this, because we don't want to be throwing in all of these different foods and all of these different things that could cause other variables in terms of weight change and, bloating, and that could then, change the look completely, and that could, influence the look on stage. So for me, it's really been about just using pretty much the same foods that I've been having all through prep, and just manipulating the quantities depending on what's needed during the day, and having a
Yeah.
lot of those carbohydrates allotted in and around the training time, mainly so that to help with training performance, and also to help with glycogen uptake post training as well. So yeah, they've been really the main things that I've been focusing on. Obviously, it is only day 2 of peak week this week, but yeah, and I guess subjectively, like how I feel, um, you know, sure, it's been great to get some more carbohydrates on board and some more food, but I definitely have noticed throughout prep, on my high days, I feel better actually the day after, because those carbohydrates have been utilized a bit more, they've been stored. You've actually have that. You might get a better sleep the next day, overnight. So there's all those other things that come into it as well.
Yeah, I think bottom line there is follow the physique and don't get carried away with numbers or what you might have heard, touted on some podcast or YouTube video or Instagram or what someone else is doing in their peak week. Like, it's so important to not compare your peak week to someone else's peak week, because you are two completely different people with different journeys, with different bodies. And so many people are under the impression that more is always better. But gosh, if it's going to come at the cost of sacrificing your look on stage and your physique, everything that you've been working so tremendously hard for, it's not worth it. Just to be able to chime up there to be like, ooh, I get to eat 400 grams of carbohydrates today from rice. Or, my coach just kept feeding me, and I kept dropping weight. Like, understandably, these people who are chronically dieted, they hear these little stories here, there, and everywhere. But remember, those are the exceptions, not the rule. But so many people get carried away with these little stories to be like, oh my God, but she got to eat so much more food than me, right? So maybe I did something wrong. It's like, no. And also, like, there's a happy medium. There's a line, right? Obviously, you don't want to be eating such a pathetic amount of food that you're like, wow, I'm really, really hungry right now. I've literally had like 1 grain of rice today. But on the flip side too, you don't want to be that person who, again, like Jack, you've been in this position before too, where you're eating a lot of food, right? And legitimately, like, your body, it's just de-stressing, your metabolism does ramp up. It happens with a few people, but it's the exception. But it's probably irritating because it's like, whoa, like, this is like, I wasn't expecting this to happen. It's another variable thrown in the works. And, if it gets past a point where, like, you do have to keep eating more food, remember that does come at the compromise of actually maybe sacrificing a little bit of your waistline, and then also, your digestion as well. So yeah, just plan ahead, play it safe. There's gonna be so much time post comp to sit down to like a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I think we'll move on to the next question. That was very well fleshed out. And so this next question says, how can I stay in a calorie deficit with pre and post workout meals. So yeah, I think there's a number of ways we can address this one, and I think maybe what the question asker is getting at here is like, we know that pre and post workout meals are so important, like they're integral for training and recovery, and yeah, how can I prioritize them while also remaining in a calorie deficit? And also, yeah, combines very nicely with comp prep, because in comp prep, you want to try and prioritize your training performance and be well fueled, but also, especially towards the tail end, you may be in a chronic deficit, and also combined with being incredibly lean as well. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, I would try and basically use other appetite management strategies in the period outside the peri-workout window. Use more vegetables and lean protein sources to satiate yourself, and that way you are able to allocate more carbohydrates to that peri-workout window. So peri-workout essentially means pre, intra, and post-workout. And therefore you can basically control your appetite while also kind of prioritizing more carbohydrates. But I think also people often look at the pre and post workout meal as absolute godsends, when we need to remember that just because you have carbohydrates pre-workout, it doesn't mean that you're utilizing those carbohydrates in the workout itself, because you've got to remember that carbohydrates need to be digested and absorbed to then be used. So yeah, why don't you just kind of speak to that, Tiara?
Yeah, so it also highly depends on what time of the day are you actually training. Because interestingly enough, they've demonstrated, particularly for those, early birds who wake up and get the worms, or, just preppers who were used to insomnia, like a 3 a.m. wake up some days is not out of the norm. So people often become AM trainers. But when you actually wake up, and you get into the gym, apart from like hydration, like that's super duper important, even above caffeine. And yeah, believe it or not, hydration for training performance would probably be above carbohydrates and protein too. But when you wake up first thing in the morning, a pre-workout meal, it doesn't necessarily need to be, this humongous bowl of that's filled with a bunch of carbohydrates, right? And really rich in HBV proteins and adequate dietary fat, etc. Like pre-workout, they've demonstrated in the research that as long as you are not hungry during a training session, you're probably going to have pretty decent performance. So that's for like really early morning wake ups. Like they've even had people like eat these like bowls of basically sludge. So think about like, like that diet jelly stuff where it's just like, it fills up your belly, but it's really got nothing to it from a calorie perspective or any sort of like micronutrient perspective. People still have decent training performance if they're not thinking about food and if they actually are well hydrated. But then that's where it comes into play of like, okay, post workout, that's where we really need to back things up, to make sure we're kickstarting that recovery process, right? They're getting adequate HBV protein, yes, some complex or maybe some simple carbohydrates in there, but probably opting for more complex because, obviously micronutrients. And you're not training anymore. So you have time to actually adequately digest it. So a really nutritious, well-balanced meal to back up post-workout if you're training really early in the AM. Otherwise, just having something, again, that's going to satiate you. I'm not telling people to eat diet jelly, but again, it can literally be like if you wanted to have some little rice cakes, with a little slab of peanut butter on there, or literally just getting by with a piece of fruit. It's really about what's going on globally throughout the entire day of eating. It's not always, like really hyper focused on that pre and that post workout. But if you're waking up a little bit earlier and you wanted to have, a good quality meal, right, before you go and train, like you could obviously digest, a nice bowl of oats with some yogurt and fruit and a few nuts or something, then yeah, it's still about, just like you said, prioritizing having more of your calories earlier in the day, perhaps really fueling the day, front loading more calories. But that could even be the same case if you were a PM trainer. You'd still want to be eating earlier during the day to fuel the day, right?
Yeah.
And then also have that glycogen stored for later in the evening.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the time of day is integral, because yeah, if you are training post lunch in the afternoon or in the evening, then you've had every opportunity throughout the day to fuel your workout. So I think that is a lot more manageable. And even in the morning as well, like at the end of the day, to achieve a calorie deficit, and if you want to lose weight, like it needs to be done. So there's going to potentially come a point, and I'm also speaking a bit more specifically to bodybuilders here, where you just got to do what you got to do. And sometimes that's going to mean training when you don't have the best fuel possible. And as Thierry alluded to, like sometimes choosing extra satiation in your training session at the expense of, okay, I don't have the perfect sort of simple carbohydrates pre-workout, like it comes again back to that boring statement of really just tailoring to the individual. Like if I'm on, not that I ever have been on 150 carb in a prep, but it's very commonplace for a female competitor. I don't want to be having rice bubbles or Cocoa Pops pre-workout if I'm on 150 carb. I want to be having something more satiating, which will keep me satiated during my workout, and something like oats, or even having kind of eggs with, I don't know, wholemeal or whole grain bread, for example. So,
because people talk so much about digestion, but again, find out what works well for you. Don't just be under the notion that, okay, I need to be eating something super small food volume, super, like fast digesting carbohydrates. Like I can only have rice bubbles lathered in honey, right? Because that's going to get into me immediately. It's like, maybe it'll get into you a little bit quicker than oats and some peanut butter and some yogurt or something. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't still have, let's be honest, 150 carb, a bowl of yogurt and peanut butter and oats. Like it's still not very big. It's still kind of a small amount of food sitting in your belly. So it's not like then when you go to the gym, like an hour later, that you're going to be heaving when you're doing an RDL. I think you're actually going to feel far better because, you want to have digested that food so quickly. You'll feel satiated. Food won't be quite as on your mind. It is slower digesting, right? So yeah, it's finding out what works well for you. Different people digest things differently. So don't think that like, okay, I have to eat certain things so that they can they're just bound to feel more comfortable. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think also, and this may help people understand further, is that resistance training isn't as glycogen depleting as other forms of exercise, like other cardio modalities. So it might sound obvious when we say it out loud, but 60 minutes of resistance training is not as glycogen depleting compared to 60 minutes of running or 60 minutes of team sports like football or hockey or basketball. And therefore, there's not as much of a carbohydrate dependence. And we can get away with not having a big or not having our glycogen stores fully saturated, for example. And I think the final point I wanted to touch on is just dietary fat. A lot of my clients come to me, and as we've alluded to, like they are quite adamant about like, okay, pre-workout has to be simple carbs, no fat. Post-workout has to be simple carbs and no fat. But then if you're someone who's on lower calories, you've just had 2 out of your 3 or 4 meals of the day with simple carbs and no fat. And where is your nutrition coming from at that point? So that's where you do need to really take it on a case-by-case basis. Like me, for example, eating over 4,000 calories a day. If I wanted to do that and still have a nutritious diet overall, I could do it. I choose not to. Like both of my pre and post workout meals are still fairly non-simple carbs, like oats and wheat bix with fruit and things like that. But yeah, I guess we're here to say that you don't have to have simple carbs pre and post workout. You can if you want, and there are certainly situations where they are beneficial, like if they're close in proximity to training. Or if you just want to do that, or if you've got multiple training bouts per day, then you want to try and uptake and absorb those carbohydrates as quickly as possible. Or if digestion is a concern, etc. So there's so many ways to skin a cat, as they say.
Your pre-workout meal, it's really just there to make sure that you're satiated during a training session. You have a little bit of energy, but when it really comes down to like being properly fueled, it's about what happened in those meals prior, right? Whether that's your training mid-afternoon or in the afternoon, what did you eat for breakfast and lunch? It's not like, okay, what did you eat for your 30 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat and 20 grams of protein like an hour before your training session? Or even if you're training early in the morning, like what was your dinner the night before? What was your lunch the day before, right? Like you're not eating that pre-workout meal for glycogen synthesis. It's just to be satiated and a little bit of energy. And probably most so, like it's probably quite a bit psychological. It's like, sweet, I just had a few carbohydrates. I can go do this.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought we'd break things up with a bit of a different question. So this one says, what are your favorite parts of being a coach? So Damien, I'll throw this over to you first. And especially since, I guess you've been doing coaching for a while, like through different modalities, but a bit more fresh with this style.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think the biggest thing overall about my favorite part of being a coach. And again, like you said, Jack, not only with online coaching with TBD, but also with my goalkeeper coaching and coaching athletes as well, and being a sports dietitian and having that experience coaching other athletes who aren't necessarily bodybuilders. It's seeing them. I guess if we relate it more back to with nutrition, it's that education aspect and knowing, I guess seeing the person's reaction when they they do fuel themselves properly, or you start to educate them and they can make decisions for themselves, and then I guess getting that realization of the importance of nutrition. And I find a lot of joy in educating people, and then going out within themselves and using the knowledge that we've had a discussion together about, and them fueling their performance and them having positive results. That's what we all want to do, and we all want to have positive results with our clients. But I find that that's super rewarding, that education aspect. And I love working with people, and especially with younger athletes as well. And I have a number of younger athletes who I work with, and seeing them within the start of their athlete journey, and exposing them to nutrition, on how we can support not only their sport but their lifestyle as a whole. And that may mean talking to family members and having consultations with family members as well around how we can improve their overall lifestyle. And when you get feedback around how their mood has changed at home and they're sleeping better and things like that, like that's it goes beyond sport at the end of the day, or it goes beyond going to the gym. Like that's a lifestyle change that's happened just from that education aspect. So yeah, they're definitely the things that I enjoy about coaching.
Yeah, no, I think Tiara and I would both echo many of those points, and I'll throw this over to you, Tiara, though, before I go. In terms of,
I was going to ask you, what's your favorite part of being a coach, Jack?
Okay.
Take the floor.
Well, I think with this answer, I'll be careful not to just echo all of Damien's points, because I think at the end of the day, I think we all do it for like the foundation of just helping people and really enjoying that process and seeing the positive impact that nutrition and training and the education in those realms can have on people's lives. But I guess I wanted to maybe mention one that was a bit more specific to bodybuilding. Like, there's so many wrong ways to go about bodybuilding, and I've seen so many times, either with clients coming to me or just on social media, like the negative impact that bodybuilding has had on them psychologically or physically or socially. And it's nice to be able to have bodybuilding be a positive impact on someone's life, done in the right way, so constructed appropriately from a timeline perspective, or just the way in which it's conducted. And then it also comes back to people bodybuild for different reasons. So like, you may not take someone where to the same extent in terms of a conditioning or like digging standpoint for someone who is doing it as a first timer, or who has a vast array of other commitments, and protocols may change slightly depending who they are, like what they have going on, and also a discussion with the client as well. Like, I think ensuring that the client is on exactly the same page as you in terms of what their commitment is and what they want to achieve out of that season, whether they're looking to be the most conditioned person on stage and sort of willing to embrace certain aspects that come with that, or whether they're looking to achieve, like, basically get more out of bodybuilding through other means. So I really enjoy taking people on that journey, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to do it with a few people where we come full circle, and they start with me in the off season. We go through an extended off season, a pre-prep, and then a comp prep, and then we start the process all over again. So it's often a multi-year journey, or at least multi-month journey, and it's really great to be able to kind of be on that ride with people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That is honestly some of the best feedback that you can ever receive as a bodybuilding coach, when you and a client get to the very end of a prep and they just tell you, they're like, yeah, listen, like, there's been components of this that have been tough, but coach, like, I still feel pretty good. Like, I people see so many things on social media and listening to podcasts, and right, like, people, they like to, like, really just put it out there. They're like, yeah, I'm in the trenches, and everything's littered with skull faces, and they're talking about like this, that, and the other, right? How it's so grueling and tough, and it takes sacrifice and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's a challenge, man. but you don't have to like compromise your health and happiness in the process to get there. And seeing someone at the very end of their prep, you know, when they still have like color to their skin and a smile on their face and life in their body, right? And they're just like, they feel like they are still genuinely thriving. They honestly feel so ridiculously proud of themselves, like the highest version of themselves yet. Like they have high levels of self-esteem, high levels of self-confidence, right? Objectively, you can still look at like their blood markers and it's like, woo, you're not iron deficient. You know, so like all of these different metrics, it just goes to show that if you're strategic about it, like you absolutely still can do bodybuilding in a healthy and sustainable way, and you're going to enjoy it for the long term, right? And like you're really going to just be a great influence and inspiration to other people. To go, it just goes to show that like, you know, it can be done, right? It obviously takes strategy and planning and yeah, a good attitude. But my favorite part of being a coach, I just say it's just going on that journey with someone, you know, and you can never pinpoint it. We all know as coaches, right? Like you have an introductory call with someone and you don't know if they're going to send you a message a week later and be like, yeah, listen, something came up. I actually don't think I can pursue this. Or you might be with that person for 5+ years, right? You just never know. But it's about going on a journey with someone and really establishing just a really just strong relationship with that person and just watching them bloom, right? Like going from like a caterpillar into a butterfly, right? But just seeing how someone just truly evolves. It's so more than just the way that they look in their physique. That's simply just a byproduct of the person that they're becoming in the process. But all of the different habits and behaviors and just like self-belief, self-confidence that they develop along the way, especially like if you're using, let's say, some sort of check-in metric, like let's say that you are using Google Sheets or people are writing you written check-ins. You can even go back in time and be like, hey, look, 2 years ago when we started, like, look at the type of vocabulary that you were using, or look at the type of questions that you were asking, or the things that you were getting a little bit like stressed about and anxious over. Look at us now. Like, you got this. It's amazing to just see how someone truly just develops and steps into a higher version of themselves. So yeah, I think developing and going along a journey with someone is seriously just so special. I absolutely love that. I love just watching people bloom into flowers and yeah, just becoming really healthy and jacked in the process.
Yep. Yeah, no, sometimes it may even feel a bit selfish how much we get out of it as well as the client, but it's a very symbiotic relationship in that sense. And
it's very rewarding.
Definitely gives very good longevity to what we do, for sure. So yeah, as per usual, we'll end on something that we learnt this week. So in true, if people remember previous episodes, like sometimes certain one of us, typically me, would and ah about what I was going to say. So in TBD fashion, I'll throw it to someone else first rather than myself.
Damien, what did you learn this week?
What have I learned this week? All about peak week and the expectation around what I need to pack, the organization aspect of it. Not only that, but also, you know, organizing like things like accommodation and staying away, and I guess even trying to minimize stress as much as possible that's associated with that. Like, whilst it's a very, very exciting time, it's also it can be a bit of a stressful time as well. So it's just, I guess, learning how to deal with that and how to get through that stage, and obviously having two children at home as well, and making sure that my fiance is, you know, settled and I guess going to be okay with a night away from me at home, like that sort of thing. And I guess just learning all about that and learning about, you know, how you emotionally react to those sorts of things, like, has been probably the biggest thing this week for me so far, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's honestly amazing, Damien. Like, you are such an inspo to so many other dads out there who are also competing, and it just goes to show that, like, you can keep your cool, right? You can make it all happen. Like, it really, all of your work, it doesn't go unnoticed. So yeah, you just deserve full recognition for that. And if anyone isn't following Damien over on Instagram, highly recommend, because like, you're so open and you share so many of these things, right? Like, you give the behind the scenes of like, what is it actually like to be a dietitian and a coach and a first-time competitor in peak week with 2 children and a newborn. Like, how am I coping? And like, again, like, you know, blood pressure is still like, you know, it's not super elevated.
Yeah, not yet. But
not until you're backstage getting a pump.
That's right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I feel, you know, to be able to share that experience not only with everyone but like with my family, it is really, really special. And if I can inspire one other person to do the same thing, one other dad to do it, and that's my job done. As we were talking before about what's your favorite part of being a coach, like inspiring people as well. Like if you can walk the talk, and then they see what you've been doing, and that inspires them to go on their journey, then that's also a fantastic part of being a coach. And I echo with what we were saying before with Jack being my coach. Like he's definitely an inspiration for me, and I want to model my way of how I approach things, not only within bodybuilding but from a business standpoint and all these sorts of things. And to go on that journey together over the past few years has been fantastic. So it definitely all comes full circle, that's for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, something that I learnt upon reflection was actually in terms of the roasting of coffee beans, which in hindsight it makes sense, but like the less roasted the coffee beans are, the more caffeine that they have, and also the higher sort of polyphenol content as well. So, which, I mean, because it's undergone less roasting or cooking or oxidization, there's more antioxidants, polyphenols, and more caffeine. So something to bear in mind if you're looking for potentially like a higher caffeine coffee product, or something which maybe retains a bit more nutritional value, which coffee is pretty good as is, but if you're looking to level up further, that might be a route to go down. So yeah, I started looking more at the lighter roasts as opposed to the heavier roasts. Not that I can really tell too much. Whenever coffee says like with a hint of cocoa or hazelnut or caramel, I mean, it all tastes the same to me. So, which is probably a good thing, because it means I can focus on other components of the coffee rather than just the taste.
Yeah, I'm always going to be under the impression people are better off if they're not coffee snobs. Just appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, I think there's levels to it. I mean, since getting a espresso machine myself, like I was just doing instant coffee for years, and I can say it's a worthwhile investment for me, at least. So yeah, you don't know until you try.
I'm still sticking to my Nescafe 63 Smooth.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in Tierra Nelson fashion, always being #serious about it. What I learned this past week is that, get this, sloths don't fart.
So they just burp instead.
Sloths are so conservative with their energy that they wouldn't even dare fart. Like, literally a sloth, okay? And like, you're way too far gone as a prepper if you're legitimately sloth status, because a sloth, it takes them like a whole week to digest one leaf, all right? Like, can you imagine like your body being that cautious with how it expends energy, that it's like, all right, every spinach leaf, every grain of rice, gotta really milk this out. But sloths literally go to the extent where even with the gases that their gut microbiome produces, they wouldn't even dare give that extra energy to like excrete those. They reabsorb the gases in their small intestine. So there you go. Sloths, they live in like swamps and trees and stuff. And given they're so energy conservative, I doubt they like put in the effort to like try to groom themselves. So they probably still stink, but those stenches wouldn't come from farts, at least. So there you go. Sloths, they don't fart.
And I just looked up their lifespan. Interesting that their lifespan is like 20 or 30 to 50 years, essentially. So
longevity, brah.
Conserving all that energy.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have thought a bit longer. I'm slightly disappointed. I was expecting like 90 to 100 years, like total thing.
Come on, but Jack, that's amazing. Like sloths are decent size, But then also, like, if they're not eating a hell of a lot of food, like their ability to even get that, like, how the hell are they not micronutrient deficient? What is their purpose? Like they would have to be like near the bottom of the food chain if anything else was hungry and wanted to eat them. Like they're not hard to like, bait. Yeah.
I mean, they're probably spreading some seeds or something. They hang in the trees and poop it out. Once a year they maybe do a poo if they don't fart. So who knows?
I don't know. Anyway, provided that, no one on Team TBD reaches legitimate sloth status, all right, and they have like energy availability that's just like through the floor, I think we're doing all right.
Yeah, well, that pretty much wraps it up for another episode. As per usual, if you enjoyed, don't hesitate to leave a 5-star rating or review, and we'll catch everyone next week.